everybody. Welcome to Captive Audience this wonderful Wednesday once again. Don Anderson, your co-host, along with Leslie Snyder. What say you, Leslie?
Good evening, everybody. Glad that we could be here. Last week was a little bit of a kerfuffle, but we're fully armed and ready for this week's session.
Absolutely. We're loaded and ready for bear. And I think we got our technology glitches out of the way. So just glad to be back. As always, feel free to hit us up with the chats and let us know what you think. But before launching into the current stuff, one of the things I wanted to discuss last week, but didn't get to because of the software issue, is the whole Greenland thing. I just want to cover just some real quick takeaway points for that so that you're involved in discussions with people around that. This might be some foundational points I think you'll find it very useful to make. I'll try to keep them relatively short. So, bottom line, the first thing is why Greenland? And it's basically four reasons that the United States needs to acquire Greenland. And we've needed to do it for a long time. Trump's not the first president to talk about this. I think this has been talked about. It's been 3 or 4 attempts going clear back to when we bought Alaska. Seward tried to buy it, and Seward was the Secretary of State for Abraham Lincoln, which tells you how long ago it was. Seward tried to buy it way back then. So this is like the fourth or fifth attempt at Greenland. Here's the reasons. Number one is geographic location puts it right in the path of any nuclear missiles that will travel from Russia to the United States. So we want Greenland. We'd have Alaska on the west, Greenland on the east, protecting the north from nuclear missiles. The second thing is, as these polar ice caps melt, what's called the Greek Gap, which is basically that strait that separates Iceland, the United Kingdom, and Greenland. That's right by the North Sea. If you look at a map, the Atlantic Ocean, that's a gap where submarines, destroyers, military vessels travel. And obviously, you want to be in control of that strait. Many countries have gone to war over straits. Think of the Strait of Hormuz, think of the Strait of Gibraltar, think of the Panama Canal. Those are all strategic straits. And so a country that controls those is basically in a position to defend itself. So that's the second reason. The third reason is for trade's perspective. So as that ice cap melts, that becomes a very profitable trade route. Again, Panama Canal, Strait of Gibraltar, Bosporus Straits, Suez Canal, same kind of a thing. A huge amount of commerce is going to be going through that. And you don't want to leave that to the tender mercies of China or Russia to control your access to trade. And then last but not least is there's the natural resources and minerals that are needed to manufacture high-tech things. And China manufactures around 90% of the rare earths in the world right now. These are needed for those weapons and smartphones, that sort of thing. So obviously, we would like to have it for that reason as well. So those are the reasons why we need that. So the only argument from there is, what are the arguments against acquiring NATO? And there's like 4 central ones. Just real quickly, it might mean the end of NATO because the Europeans are against it. My argument would be is, well, good, we don't need NATO. NATO, they need us. We don't need them. We've been covering the defense nut for Europe for the last 80 years. It's high time they picked up their own nut and paid for their own defense. Russia's at their back door, not ours. We have an ocean and 3,000 or 4,000 miles separating us from Russia. Not our problem. Some will say, well, China could do the same thing with Taiwan. Yeah, they could, but they haven't. And why haven't they? Because they can't. And there's lots of reasons, but I'll give you one in particular. Remember when Hitler, when we needed to invade Normandy, the storming the beaches of Normandy on D-Day, Hitler had 2.5 years to basically prepare the beaches to prevent Great Britain and the United States and Canada from invading Norway. 2.5 years. Look at how many lives were lost doing that. Taiwan's had 80 years to prepare the beaches. 80 years. Trust me, the Taiwanese have a very special surprise lined up for China should they invade Taiwan. They haven't done it because they can't do it. And finally, one of the arguments here is, well, Russia can do the same thing to the Ukraine. Well, they could, but Russia has had a hell of a time dealing with Ukraine, which tells you how pathetic their military is. A country with 140 million can't defeat a country with 6 million. I think they're overrated. The national media never says these things, but you sit back and just use your powers of deduction. You look at that and you say, hey, the only reason Ukraine's in that fight at all is because we're selling the weapons to the Europeans so that they can sell them to the Ukrainians so the Ukrainians can fight. And by the way, the reason we're selling the weapons to the Europeans, because they pay so little for their own defense that they don't even have factories anymore to make munitions. I'm not talking about sophisticated high-tech weapons. I'm talking about basic artillery and bullets. Great Britain and Germany can't make them anymore because we've been covering their nut for them for 80 years. Somebody please tell me why we should stay in NATO. I wish we would leave. So American taxpayer has basically been the American tax sucker for 80 years. We rebuilt Europe from scratch. Remember the Marshall Plan from when you were in high school? We spent $130 billion. Gave them that, by the way. That wasn't a loan. Gave it to them. Rebuilt Europe from scratch. Saved them from themselves 2 times in the last 100 years. And then we let them tariff us so they could have more manufacturing that rebuilt their base, gutting the manufacturing in our country so they can have manufacturing in their country. And what do we get in exchange for it? They think they have say-so over the United States having access to Greenland? Shoot, let me stop. What do you call it? Mic drop.
Well, that was very thorough, Don.
Well, I had to stop myself there. There's a lot more to that story, but any American who has any worry about that argument whether the United States should have Greenland or not, it's crazy. So we're going to rely on them for our defense. They haven't even paid for their own defense. And remember, the Europeans bought their gas and oil from Russia, their enemy. And they bought it from them instead of us, our supposed ally. With friends like these, who needs enemies?
Right.
So there's my Greenland rant. I hope y'all enjoyed it.
Well, I did, if nobody else did.
Yeah, I had to stop myself, but there's lots of other stuff that's, the media moves so fast. See, that was a hot news last week when we had our software glitch. Now there's been a bunch of more stuff that's happened since then. Now that's like in the rearview mirror. I just saved that from last week. So what have you, Leslie? Which of these new things should we start off with?
Well, I mean, I'm just a little bit more simple. And so what thrills me is that there's actually been some arrests in those Minnesota church invasion. Don Lemon was not arrested, but he is certainly under investigation. And I just love it when karma hits. And we get to see it because, as Christians, we know that while there will be a judgment ultimately, too often it feels like we're not actually seeing it. And I love to see this instant karma machine that's going on with Trump, and Pam Bondi in charge of things, the DOJ. So, looking forward to see kind of how that all shakes out, and really looking forward to watching the Democrats try to defend that, just like they tried to defend, all these other ridiculous issues they have, and so I think that's going to be really cool to watch, people, and especially as they start digging into all the corruption, and they have this new assistant attorney general position that's going to be reporting, I guess, reports to Pam and then reports into the president, or maybe actually reports directly into, is that person reporting straight to Trump? Whoever it is, the person's all focused on corruption. And I just love it that they're going to be digging into the networks and really seeing, who these people are who are leading the efforts to obstruct justice and defraud the taxpayer. So,
it's very clear that the reason that they've driven this protest stuff to the skies is to deflect attention away from this massive corruption. I mean, this scandal puts Watership to absolute shame. I feel like we've said that about 5 or 6 other scandals, but the financial destruction of this, they're talking 18 billion with a B. It's like unbelievable. And clearly it's pretty clear. The governor knew about it, and probably the mayor as well. It's almost like, how could you miss $18 billion?
Well, they're missing 24 billion in California that was spent on homelessness and can't be identified.
Well, California will be next. California will be the mother lode.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, they've got 8 different areas of the government that are under investigation because they're not, they did the audit, and there's 8 different areas in our budget, that have some suspicion of financial impropriety and corruption. So I love it.
Yeah,
I
and
love to see it.
the beauty of this is it's coming together at the perfect time for midterms. I mean, it's just perfect. There's no way you can get out of discussing these issues. As much as they're trying, I mean, they wanted their Kent State moment. We talked about this a few weeks ago, and they
Yeah.
finally got it. Now a couple of them have been killed, and it's a stunning that took this long for that to happen. I can't believe the level of control that these agents have had, um, that something like this hasn't happened. Now part of this is you look at the professionalism of this group. Going back again, got to go back to the whole history. Go back to the Wayback Machine. Go back to the riots in the '60s and '70s. When that Kent State thing happened, you're talking National Guardsmen who were like basically teenagers out there, and somebody panicked. I don't even think they know to this day who fired a shot, but fired a shot, killed the student. But that was clearly organic protest. They weren't going out there trying to get a violent
Yeah.
response from the National Guard like these people are. I mean, they're in their face, they're blowing whistles, they're getting physical with them. Who in the world, who in their right mind would think you can get physical with an officer who is in the middle of initiating an arrest? Um,
Well, I love that they're first of all, I think a lot of Democrats are waking up. I'm sure you saw that poll that was reported on that, most Americans are in favor of deporting criminal illegals, and most Americans are in favor of supporting federal agents and police. And I think that the more that the Trump administration and law enforcement, heads can commingle law enforcement agencies, whether it's feds to the state to the local, the more that you can commingle that, the more that people are going to say, well, my brother's a cop, my uncle's a cop, my dad was, a border patrol, my son, is, in the National Guard. Like, the more that they can make people realize law enforcement is law enforcement.
mhm,
And you may be angry because you think you've got an angle on one issue, but if you instead just sort of deconstruct it and recognize that these people are not setting policy, they are simply acting out the directions
mhm,
of the ones who made policy. And if you start taking out your anger and your violent behavior on the frontline people, I mean, everybody knows or is related to somebody in law enforcement. And we just keep having to have that conversation and use that commingled, terminology so that people are reminded of that. It's
sure, yeah.
that way, it's not an other. There's no other category. It's like we're all in this.
Yeah, and it's I'm sure you've heard this term. Most of us conservatives heard this term growing up. You hear the term rule of law, and we hear it tossed around. We're going to be a nation of laws and a nation where there's rule of law. You just take it for granted. I never even think about the meaning of that or what that means. But the events of the last couple of years have really reminded me of just what that means. These people are anarchists. I mean, the rule of law is I get to choose which laws I obey and which ones I like and which ones I don't like. That's not how it works. The crack up to me about this whole thing, and there's always a history lesson in this, is we fought a civil war over this very issue. The war, of course, slavery was the instigator of it, but that wasn't the reason. The reason was basically the South wanted to have follow its own rules, and they wanted to have slavery, and the North didn't, or the Union did not. And we need to, like, if you're going to have a federal government, federal governments had to be supreme to laws had to be supreme to state laws, and they did not want to do that. And that's precisely what we have here. So if they can decide, Minnesota and any other state, any other sanctuary state or municipality can decide we're not going to follow this particular law from the federal government because we don't like it, then what other laws can they not decide not to follow?
Right.
And that's how you have the nation coming apart. That's how you create conditions for civil war. That's how you create you take the united out of the states. Which at the end of the day, I think the true revolutionaries, that's precisely the goal.
Yeah, of course. Well, it's to spread chaos. There's no productive end game. It's let's just tear things down. I mean, I guess the productive end game from them is let's tear down, for the masterminds, let's tear down what we have so that we can be the solution providers. We can be the heroes to reconstruct, but it's based on, an huge power grab because we have to, we're in chaos and we need to have a huge power grab in order to mandate that certain things be put in place structurally and economically and socially and all of these things, and then we're the winners. So I mean, the poor schlubs in the middle, the average citizen, we don't benefit at all.
Yeah, and then you have the useful idiots, the ones out there screaming in the front lines. They are the first ones to get killed, as always. They're expendable. And the names of these people we just described, they'll be forgotten in a few months because that's how this whole thing works. Thank you for the use of your body. Let's move on to the next one.
Yeah.
And it's just incredible. These people are so, deluded that they are willing to give their lives away in such a useless, senseless way.
Yeah.
It's really sad.
Yeah. Well, they're brainwashed. I don't know. I don't know what else to say. I mean, well, there's a lot to say, but it's making me think of the whole mask thing and how now they're demanding that ICE not wear masks. And it's like, so you've got a protester with body armor, a face mask, and potentially a weapon, right? Most likely a weapon, whether it's a brick or an ice pick or a gun, as in the case with Freddie. He had a loaded gun and 2 spare mags on his person. And then you've got these law enforcement people who are supposed to be walking around barefaced. I mean, for goodness sakes, if I was somebody's, if I was an ICE agent's wife or mom, no way would I want my loved one out there completely revealed. I mean, that's why the whole church, invasion happened, is because they found out the identity of an ICE agent and they went after his church.
And see, yeah, and the people, the puppet masters of this whole thing know this. Remember, never forget the end goal is to flood the country with as many migrants as possible, because the objective is to basically those become voters for them on top of destroying the country, but they become voters for them and you become a one-party country. That's essentially what the goal is. So the fact that they are out there getting in the way of ICE agents, literally arresting the worst of the worst. Now, we all know if you've broken immigration laws, whether you're a criminal otherwise or not, you should be gone. But we're starting with the worst of the worst, and they're willing to defend the worst of the worst. And the reason for that's their strategy. They want to make it so painful that eventually we just back off and say, all right, heck, the other 30 million can stay here, which is what's always happened before. That's what they want. And that's why we're seeing this.
Yeah.
Because if they're not successful with this, they can't win.
Well, and also, I think it's important to remember that people will claim on the other side, well, there's innocent people that are, maybe their only offense was, sneaking across the border, and they've been, a law abiding, potentially even tax paying, if they stole a Social Security number, member of our society ever since, right? And they've had jobs, whatever. And in blue states, there are people being swept up in these raids that are not the most violent. They're being swept up because our local law enforcement is not sharing the records. So when ICE wants to they've got 3, 4, 5 people that they're targeting, and they go into a location and they scoop up everybody because they don't have the information about all these other people. They don't necessarily, that's part of the problem. That's why innocent people are getting scooped up. And when I say innocent, you know what I mean, right? Like low offenders.
Right.
Because we don't have where states like mine in California, that are sanctuary, they're not sharing information. So, you've got some major cartel dude who, is getting as much scrutiny as, my landscaper. And
that's the other side's fault. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're here illegally, you need to go and come back legally. I think that should happen. If you get arrested, that's just part of the deal. Now, that's not the lowest hanging fruit. That's not who we're trying to get first. But if we get some of them too, then that's great because they need to go. That's rule of law, and it sounds hard and it feels hard to say it. We can all trot out 1,000 sob stories about it, but what other country would allow this? You can't be a country if you allow this. If I just went down to Mexico, you think they'd let me stay? Hell, the African countries wouldn't let me stay.
Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, we'll see. Well, I mean, we'll see how it continues to roll out. I'm looking forward to tax season. I haven't filed my taxes yet, but there was definitely. I mean, Trump is saying, and there's some speculation that I mean, I haven't gotten a tax refund in a long time, but apparently I'm going to pay fewer taxes based on the big beautiful bill.
Yeah, that
You know,
seems to
allowance.
be
So
that seems what I've read. I haven't looked at myself personally yet, but just across the board in general, it looks like people are going to be some pretty happy clams this year. And when was the last time people were happy after April 15th? I
yeah,
mean, talk about a something people will remember come vote day. That will
yeah,
be one of the things they'll remember for
yeah.
sure.
Well, and those of us who aren't, relying on a return,
Mhm,
at least knowing that the tax code has been rewritten so that there is, some savings that will continue on.
mhm,
I mean, I just got a kick in the ass because I participated in an FSA with my employer and I missed the deadline to spend all my money. And so
mhm,
I just lost out on $1,300.
mhm.
And the money, it's gone. It's totally gone. And it's like that sort of stupid stuff. I mean, Doge isn't attacking that necessarily, but I mean, that's the sort of stuff that, like, as a taxpayer, give me a break. We're all just trying to do the right thing. We're doing the right thing. We're paying and we're filling out, we're living our lives in the right way and we're buying health insurance and we're buying life insurance and we're doing a trust for our kids and we're doing all the right things. And we just continue to get like kicked in the teeth.
Well,
So
you haven't had the right investments, that's all. You haven't followed the Pelosi fund or the, Ilhan fund. I was reading somewhere there's a stockbroker who basically tracks what Pelosi does, and that's what they do, and they've done quite well.
Well, there's an app. There's an app for it. I can't remember
Is
what it
that
is.
right?
I signed up for it, but there's an app, and all they do is follow politicians' trades.
That it's appalling, but that's hey, you know what do they know that we don't know? My gut is this is not based on any cerebral analysis in the movement of markets or anything.
No, because you're not smart. The people in public office are not smart. They're
Well,
not. I
well,
mean, okay, there's a few, Thomas Massey, the guy's smart. JD Vance, he's smart, right? I mean, we've got some smarty pants, but
uh, well, it's a different kind of smarts. I mean, Maxine Waters got $2 million mansion. So she didn't look too
right.
smart, but she's smart enough to do that.
Corruption smart, absolutely. But when yeah,
Corrupt and
like you
smart,
said, if you're not building anything really, you're not doing
Mhm.
anything productive.
Right?
You're
Mhm.
just cheating.
Yeah, and these are all the reasons why the government's just got to get smaller. And I can't remember what the numbers were, but that was another fantastic thing. The size of the federal government in terms of the number of people employed by it has gone down dramatically in it since he's been in office. I don't know if it's ever gone down, but to go
Yeah.
down dramatically like that is fantastic. That means the taxpayers are supporting less people on the government dime, number one. And number two, those people can go out and actually do something that's productive and not mooch on the rest of us. That's a positive thing.
Yeah. Hopefully they have some skills that are marketable and they haven't just been leeches, for this whole time.
Well, yeah, that's it's harder to leech in the private sector because they actually have to they have to actually make a dollar, right? So, but a lot of them may find that they reawaken that thing inside of them that's exciting and interesting rather than just sitting and looking out the window 8 hours a day. Or couch surfing for working at home a couple hours. I say working at home a couple hours a day. A number of people will probably find that it's going to be exhilarating to actually do something productive rather than just wait for your 20 years of retirement to come along.
I sure hope so. I think it's going to be a huge culture shift. I mean, their culture shift isn't the right word I'm looking for. Culture shock. There's
Mhm.
going to be people that go, wait, I have to report out metrics every quarter? Wait, you mean at the end of the year, I have to actually have done what I said I was going to do. And like the deadlines for getting there are every quarter, every like we don't have 5-year projects. We don't have 10-year ongoing projects where you just move the needle slightly, like, sorry, no, we don't do that in the private sector. And if these people have never worked in the private sector, they don't really understand what that kind of urgency looks like.
Yeah, I tell you, there was a famous line from that movie Ghostbusters when two professors were talking, and the one guy was saying he might have to get a job in the private sector, and then the other guy says, "That's going to be really hard. They expect results." It's like the best line ever, but it's true. I think what happens, and came to this conclusion maybe when I was in my early 30s, that so 1 in 4 people are basically moochers. Anybody who's ever been in the college study group or worked with other people, 1 in 4 people is not going to work. 3 people to work, and you're going to carry the fourth person. That's just the mathematical, it's the 80-20 rule at work, right? Maybe it's 1 in 5, right? That's just how it works. But in the past, it used to be that 1 in 5, flip it for government. So people who are part of the mooch group know the best place to go mooch is the government because you can never get fired, right? So 4 out of 5 government employees are moochers. And then the one government person is working his butt off and carrying the other 4. I've observed this. I'm quite sure. I wish somebody would do a study, but I'm pretty sure that's the mathematical truism. And the reason for that is because you can go to the government and like kick your feet up and do nothing. Now, if you find a big enough company, you can find a cubby hole in the spot. You can get away with that for extended periods of time, depending on the size of the company and that sort of thing. But eventually it will catch up. That's number one. And number two, you usually don't get to the top of the heap doing that like you can do in government. Now, this is the thing that's changed in the last 20 years. It used to be understood that if you went to go work for the government, you were getting security
Mhm.
and you're trading that off for money, right? I'm going
Yeah.
to make this money, but I'm never going to get fired.
Right.
Now, you go get a government gig. Not only do you get more money because the way these government unions have worked, you get more money and you get to like be a mooch. So so it's really made it so that a thinking person, and I remember this occurred to me a few years ago. If I was a young person now, I'd be trying to get a job in the federal government because I'm busting my butt out here in the private sector, not getting paid nothing, and no benefits and all this other stuff. Well, I'd go to the government and slap it in neutral and get paid a whole lot more. And see, that's not good for the country, though. I mean,
No.
that I would think that is really bad, and that needs to change. Because eventually, if everybody's doing that, this whole thing will begin to fall off the cliff. The thing that's made this country, one of the things that made it the greatest country on earth, is that people are productive and they're trying to improve their lot in life and the only way they do it in the private sector is to make somebody else's life better. That's
Yeah.
what capitalism works. But if everybody wants to go work at the government, be a mooch, pretty soon we start looking like India.
Well, we look like India. We look like, I mean, what do you mean? Explain that. Keep going with that.
Minneapolis. Okay. So what I mean by that is, if you know anything about how India works, you think to yourself, that's a country filled with really brilliant people. Why is the place such a dung heap? And I hate to be rude, I'm just calling the shots like it is. Why is it like that? Why is this GDP per capita like, out of what 150 countries that report that or something, is down to around 95, 100, 120? Why is it so horrible, right? And one of the reasons is because they have a clan culture. And if you want to get promoted, they only promote people within their clan. They only promote people in their family, only promote people that they know. And then they go get these government gigs where they just don't do anything. So if you want to get something done in India, it's Kafkaesque, the amount of paper and junk. If you think we got bad regulations, nothing gets done in that place, right? Because you got layer after layer after layer of people related to each other who are doing nothing. And so that's right. That's one of the reasons why the country remains so backwards. Um, and 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 that gets to a whole nother thing around cultures. As you look around the world, I think I did a rant on this the other day, so I'll just real quickly on this. You'll notice that and I'm going to use GDP per capita as a measurement for how well the society is doing, right? So the 5 countries with the highest per capita GDP also happen to be the countries where people immigrate to. They're trying to get to those countries, right?
Mhm.
So some of those big ones would be like the United States, Canada, Great Britain, Germany, France, right? What do those countries have in common? Well, they're Christian. The culture is Christian. Now, that doesn't mean everybody in the culture is practicing
No.
Christianity,
No.
but the countries are Christian countries. The foundational principles by which they behave, whether they know it or not, those are Christian foundations. You go to the worst countries per capita GDP, and what you'll see, and they're like at the bottom of the barrel. We're talking like Somalia, Afghanistan, what Iraq, China, North Korea, right? Those countries are either communist or they are Islamic, and the cultures of those lead to the performance that they get. And a lot of the performance that they get is because of the culture. Because essentially, what those cultures do is they remove entire swaths of the population from being able to compete. So, if you're in India, for example, they officially don't they no longer do it, but in practice, you still have that system. I forget what they call it, where you have the caste system. So you have the untouchables on up to the Brahmins, right? So if you're an untouchable, you will never get anywhere else in life. I don't care how smart, how brilliant you are, whatever it is. So those people are just taken out of the economic picture. So there's a whole, it'd be like having a football team and saying, you know what, if you look like this, you can't play football. So you just
Right.
take the talent pool and just wipe it right out. In Islamic countries, you say, women, 50% of the population, you're out, just right off the top. You don't get to compete. So 50% of the talent pool can't even play in the game. A lot of these countries still have slavery. So if you're a slave, guess what? You're out. So is it any wonder that nothing comes out of these countries? Think about the period of exploration in the 1500s and 1600s when all the great explorers were out doing their thing. Think about Magellan. Think about Columbus. Amerigo Vespucci. You go. All of these guys were. What countries were they coming from? Well, they were coming from Portugal, Great Britain, Spain, France. None of them were coming from those other countries
Right.
because and I think the reason it's a cultural thing. They're not looking to have the explorer's imagination to make society better, to take the risks, the chances. Those countries essentially flatlined around 1500. Ottoman Empire became the sick man of Europe by 1920. It ceased to exist at the end of World War One. I think that's a lot of the reason why. It's cultural.
Hmm.
It's like culture drives behavior, behavior drives results. We know this in sports. We talk about it all the time. What's the culture of the locker room? Everybody talks about that, right? Culture of the locker room drives the behavior. Religion drives the culture because all religion is a set of beliefs, is a set of beliefs around how you should behave, right?
Hmm.
How we
Hmm.
behave determines the result we're going to get. And if my behavior is, I'm going to throw you off a building because you're gay, I'm going to put a bag over your head because you're a woman. Uh, you're in the wrong race or color, so you don't get to participate in the economy. I've just like whacked out 70 or 80% of the talent pool. Is it
Hmm.
any wonder that my economy is going to underperform?
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and
Right.
that's why the West is better. And the interesting thing about this, Leslie, I think this is absolutely fascinating. You think about, you can take a Christian country, like let's take the United States, and the more Christian the behavior is, the better that part of the country will be. And we'll just use the blue state, red state as a perfect example of that. So, what performs better, Franklin, Tennessee, or Baltimore, Maryland?
Mm.
Los Angeles, California, or you know, uh, you know, name your place, some conservative place, right? Naples, Florida. Is the behavior. If you're having children out of wedlock all over the place, that community is not going to do as well as a community where people like get married, stay married to the same person, raise a
Right.
kid.
Right.
It's
Right.
not rocket science, but nobody will say it because it's not politically correct. But remember, old dads don't have to be politically correct.
Yeah. White women have to be politically correct,
Oh my goodness.
as it turns out.
This is the terrible thing. You're gonna laugh. I told my son the other day. So these are the conversations that happen in black circles that you never hear in the general press, right? So it's like when the liberal white women were going crazy, we said to each other, "Damn, I'm glad it's them, not us this time.
Uh-huh.
For once, it's not us."
I saw like a really funny video on Instagram. It was this Mexican dude who was,
Uh,
showing a video of like some white woman who was being pushed by a vehicle, by an ICE vehicle, because she had, was resisting and was obstructing. And finally the guy just got tired of it and started like slowly moving his car. And she's running backwards with her hands on the hood, screaming at the guy. And this Mexican guy was like, Yeah, sorry, Rachel, but like Julio and Jose are not going to show up to save your ass. Like here you are, all the white women that are out there, Maureen and Rachel and Jennifer, who are showing up and taking a sick day to protest, for against ICE. Those dudes are not showing up for those ladies.
You know, it's the craziest thing you've ever seen. So, and how do you describe it? So, and it's not just, and these are like, generally speaking, well-off liberal white women, right? This isn't regular run of the mill. These people generally are college educated, which I hate to even use the word educated in college anymore. They don't belong together. Um, but they're out there thinking they're helping the downtrodden, if you will. But I don't know that I think it's really that at all. I think it's narcissism.
Yeah, I do. I think you're right. I think they're spoiled little brats who are irrelevant. And they need something to make themselves feel important. And so they sort of, you know, they adopt these imagined problems and then start some sort of fight, start an effort, against these imagined problems and never actually, they don't have these problems themselves. They're not walking down the streets and working in the workplaces with these people whose problems they think they understand. And so they're now going to adopt and fight for. And, like they've never bothered to actually go into the neighborhoods, go into the communities and have conversations and find out what's really going on. How does the legal immigrant population feel about illegals being here? They're
The
not happy. They
No,
don't
right.
like it. So if you're going to pick up somebody's issue and start fighting for it, why don't you actually become informed about who you think you're fighting for?
Well, it's something very patronizing about it. It's like they create a caricature of what someone of a different, what, name your race, religion, whatever it is, and then they like think that's who everyone is. So if you look like this, therefore you are that, and
Right.
it's the most patronizing thing ever. And you see this all the time. And I can't remember, was it Biden's wife? It was like the most. It was so cringy. She talked about having tacos and relating that to being with like she can relate to Mexican people because she eats tacos. It's like
Yeah.
you got to be kidding me. Hillary Clinton, whenever she go into a black church, suddenly she had a Southern black accent, and it's like so cringy. And I don't even think they realize it because they're so bought into behaving that way. It's
Well,
just
and
like you're just
yeah,
not authentic.
and they've been applauded. They've been validated for that. They keep getting voted in.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
look at the
because
Clintons, look at their track record, look at Biden, look at his track record. I mean, there was no penalty for that behavior. Even
yeah.
Obama. I mean, he didn't grow up as a disadvantaged black, or mixed race dude.
Uh,
His grandparents were bankers.
it's
His mom was
unbelievable.
white. He went to the most private exclusive
Mhm.
school on Hawaii and then ended up at Harvard. Like that's not a
Yeah.
dude that some inner city black man can relate to.
Well, they run in these geographies where there's like no competition. They've been gerrymandered in such a way that they're going to always get that vote. And the people that live in those geographies are just duped. There's no other way that I can say it. I mean, think to yourself, the most the most insane voting block in the United States is the black vote. I don't care what anybody says. When you vote 95% for a party, that's like insane. Nobody else does that. I
The
think the
Jews.
second Yeah, I think the second worst, the Jew, yeah, Jews are even more. Yeah, and so you could argue they're even crazier because they're voting for the party that would kill them if they could. And I think they're at like 80, 85%, something like that. Just common sense would tell you, if nothing else, that you be 50% and hey, that's just part of negotiating. You have something to negotiate for when the candidate doesn't know which way you're going to go. But with the black vote, let's just give it to them every single time, no matter
Yeah.
what. And,
Yeah.
and what have you gotten in return for it? You've
Right.
gotten more, you got more prison, more drugs, less jobs. I mean, there's absolutely nothing that's done good for those Democrat-held cities.
Yeah.
They've all been hellholes. And you take the Detroits, the Baltimores, the St. Louis's, East St. Louis, you go down the list. They've been Democrat for like, well, since the 60s, and they've gotten worse and worse and worse. At what point will you figure it out? I think we might be finally reaching that point with this immigration thing. That might have been the bridge too far, because what the far left basically did was they, not that they've ever cared about black people, but they made it very clear you are not the most important people now, because we could get more people across the border. We'll put them in first class hotels in your neighborhoods and put them in your parks and your recreation centers and the hospitals you used to go to, and just move you out, right? So I hate racial politics, but that's what's occurring, and it's not the right reason for these people to switch their vote, but it is a reason. It's not the best reason, as I said, but it is a reason, and I think that's going to have an effect.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the Voter Rights Act,
Oh my goodness.
and the in front of SCOTUS, and that might just come tumbling down any day, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's huge. I mean, I think the court watchers, those who pay attention to this the most, say the vote is something like, is there nine Supreme Court justices? There's nine. I think they're thinking 6-3, maybe 7-2, based on what they're hearing on the arguments from the bench. And for those of you who don't remember, with the and I'm going to like not be very eloquent with this, but let me give it a shot. So the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was passed, and then after that, there were, and that was designed so that equal votes, right? And that's all well and good, but it was then decided along the way that that districts could be gerrymandered because there wasn't enough black representation in Congress. So it's okay to gerrymander districts based on race, and that's pretty much what they did, so you could get this representation. Well, that's clearly unconstitutional, but it's been allowed to run for the last 40 or 50 years. Well, now that's being challenged, and there was a case out of Louisiana, I think, that brought the case, and the case essentially says, well, you can't gerrymander based on race, and so that's what's before the Supreme Court. And if anything you'd add to that, I know I'm missing something there, but that's big picture. That's the case.
No, I mean, that's kind of what I had, that it was, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which allows for racially drawn districts.
Mhm.
And I mean, it just as you said, it's insulting.
Well, it's discriminatory for one thing.
Well, of course, it's illegal. It's all of those things. It's racist, but it's demeaning.
Mhm.
To assume that, that, and it really doesn't equip the people in that district with the best quality candidate. Just vote for the best quality candidate. Now, we know that person doesn't always win, but hopefully we're putting some things in place to ensure cleaner voter rolls and all these other things that we're doing. But the structure has to be there to at least guide people to the right, to the fair outcome, whether we agree with it or not, right? That our candidate may not win, whatever, but at least if you have the structure in place that, provides for the opportunity for the fairest outcome, or the most true outcome. And so, yeah, I think they're warning that this is going to start tearing down all sorts of carefully laid plans.
Oh my goodness, it will create havoc. Because one thing, Republicans, as usual, being weak and doing the most aggressive things, Democrats have gerrymandered the country like to the hilt. There's not much more they can do. But since Republicans haven't been doing that, and now they're actually doing it, like we saw what happened in Texas. I think there was a 5-vote swing in Texas as a result of that. If this Supreme Court, if this court decision goes the way it goes, we're talking probably somewhere, it could be like a 25-vote swing. That would be huge. It's the sort of thing that would almost put Republicans in the majority for a generation. I mean, that's how huge it is. So, and that should happen before the midterms. Oh my goodness, I think it's landslide time. And then when you combine that with this next census coming along, if we're able to have the court, I'm not sure it'll be a court thing or if it's a presidential executive order thing, But the way it's been is in order to determine the number of electoral votes is the number of people residing in the state, not the number of citizens in the state. That is like the most insane thing. I still can't believe that. It's one of the few things that the writers of the Constitution missed. There's, if you just happen to be in California, you don't have to be a citizen, but you count for resident. You count for purposes of determining the number of electoral votes. Can you imagine if that were not the case? How many electoral votes California would lose just from that? And then you throw out the people who shouldn't be here in the first place. You can imagine the swing that's going to make.
Okay, Don, let me ask you this. Are these, when they take the census, because I don't remember, do they act, they're not checking your resident card.
No.
They're just coming to your door, right? And they're not asking. Okay. So if you have states that have high university attendance, right? You've got like big school, like California has, how many universities do we have in our state? I mean,
a whole pack.
A couple hundred, 500, right? I mean,
yeah, the census is strictly how many human beings are in the United States.
So, I mean,
they ask questions, but for purposes of counting, for purposes of electoral representation, they're not counting whether you're a citizen or not.
So if you have a lot of colleges, or right, these are temporary residents, right? We're not talking about, places that would attract, a business but economic centers. But if you're just talking about schools, universities, and they're knocking door to door in the dorms or, student housing, apartment buildings where they know a bunch of kids live. I mean, that could swing things.
Absolutely. Well, California clearly is represented more than it should be for a whole bunch of reasons. And it's already set to lose just from people leaving the state. It's looking at losing, I think, 5 just from that, from the population going down. Now think about what the impact might be if this law passes, which I think it will. And then you look at the number of illegals that are being removed from the state. You start adding all that up, it's going to be really interesting. How many, and all of those electoral votes that are lost are going to red states too, by the way. So there's a lot to be optimistic about. Cautious optimism. In addition, I suspect that as they clean up these voter rolls, and I saw here in Oregon, for example, there was a report and they found 800,000 registrations were like fake. This is a state with only 6 million people. But if 800,000 of them were fake, that is huge. So
what state was that?
This is Oregon. So is it really a blue state? It might be more purple than we think. And I suspect the same will be true of California.
I sure hope so. Yeah. Okay.
So there's some, so I'm, yes, one could worry, but I think there's a whole lot of reason for optimism here. So pretty positive. And then I thought 2 other things before we close off. I thought I'd just throw out there. So this is one of these things Trump's talking about is banning home purchases by institutional investors. So this is that whole thing about helping with the affordability for young people in terms of getting homes. The other one was Trump's urging credit card companies to slash interest rates down to 2% for 1 year. Now, that's not an executive order or anything, but we all know how he works. You start with berating them, and if that doesn't work, we might have to move to a bigger stick.
Yeah.
I think that's certainly a fair. Think about the number of people. Hey, I'm not making any justification for people getting in trouble with credit cards. We all know people that have done that. Granted, some of them had no business doing it, do no fault of their own. Some other ones, bottom line though, they're in that hole. Is it really fair to be hitting people for 30%? I mean, that's like mob interest rates. You don't pay them to break your kneecaps, right? So it would be really cool to see something like that come along, I think. So those are a couple of interesting things too that I think that are out there that will really help people in terms of the whole affordability thing. So we'll see how that'll play out.
Well, and gold and silver are surging.
Mhm.
And so even if you haven't invested in gold and silver, that what it does is it just enriches, it just enriches, um, it's better for the economy. And of course it's better for the government. Obviously we're a major gold holder. We'll see what happens to, revelations about Fort Knox. We'll see if there's anything that comes out of that
Is there
after
anything
this
in there? We don't
university.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's some things I'm not sure if they're ever really gonna tell us, but we'll see.
They tease it. They tease it. Yeah. I don't know. I'm going back through my notes. I mean, the one thing that you and I talked about last week that we didn't get to share was something that I hadn't really been dialed into, but I alarms me is this, what do they call it? The laying down or laying in. What do they call it?
Oh,
Basically,
yeah,
they
they have
call
that. They use that in China, like, but it's laying flat, they call it in China, I think.
yeah, and then they call themselves rat people, I think. Where basically all they do is just these are young people who've become completely disillusioned with
Mhm,
life. They've kind of become nihilistic. They
mhm,
just have no hope. I mean, I was reading an article and they were in the Epic Times, and some of these people, a lot of these people are college graduates,
mhm,
because in China you really only have two options. You either um, score at a certain level after taking the test and you get into university, or you don't pass the test and basically you become a delivery driver. I mean, there's no real life path for those
mhm,
people who don't pass the university level. I mean, it's not like, oh, you can go to college or you can do a trade. No, you
yeah,
become a delivery driver. There's no middle, right? You're up here or you're down here. Okay. So these are college, you know, educated kids who see no hope for the future because they can't get jobs. The economy is so terrible. They cannot get jobs.
mhm,
And people, so not only can they not get jobs to sustain themselves, a lot of them are working as delivery drivers, and they're delivering to other of these like lay down culture people. I mean,
mhm,
and these people are like living with their parents or living, I don't know that I don't seem to have a real good insight into who is sustaining these people, but they had a contest to see who could lay down the longest. And the guy who won
uh
laid in bed for over 30 hours.
Yeah, so I know that it's a thing. So the countries that have the worst problem with this are the countries that have the least amount of prospects for young people in terms of jobs that are decent paying, number one. And the combination that goes along with that is like out exorbitant housing costs. So they can't buy their first home, which leads to not wanting to get married. And on top of that, not wanting to have kids because you can't afford them. So the country that I think probably is number one for this is South Korea. Their fertility rate is zero point 0.8. Get your hands around that. Zero point 0.8. Like nobody's getting married, nobody's having kids. And the thing is, housing's exorbitant. Uh, and the dog fight to get a decent job is like just murderous if you can get one. And so people are just saying, well, rather than go through all of that, I'll just chill and do as little as possible. And you see that now that's a big deal in China. Canada, I think, is experiencing that. I think the average home is something like 12 times earnings, 13 times earnings in Canada. So like $1 million for a home, your basic home, and like name Montreal, Toronto, any of the big cities up there.
Yeah. Well,
Vancouver, BC. Yeah.
in China, there's a unique issue because they had the one child policy for so long. So you have bunches and bunches of boys and much, much, much fewer girls.
Mhm.
So not only are you priced out of the market because you don't have a good job and the economy sucks, but you're not going to find a life mate.
Yeah.
So you don't, I mean, who are you going to live with? Who are you going to build? Like where is life can be expensive, and you can feel a little, frustrated and priced out of, your whatever, what your dream situation, your dream home, your dream. But at least if you have a partner that's going to like fight with you on that, then you hold each other up, you share expenses. If you don't even have the prospect of finding love, finding a
No,
partner, you're just
they have
alone.
They have created a disaster. Now, we're better off than them, but we're not in perfect shape. I think we're at 1.7 right now. But think about this. I was looking at this. It's funny we're having this conversation. I was just looking at the statistic. So in 1900, the fertility rate was worldwide was 5.6, 5.62. 1800 it was 5.62. In 1900 it was around 5. um, in 2000, this is worldwide, it was 2.3. Think about that change from 5.6 in 100 years to 2.3. And 2.3 is above replacement, but that's a hell of a drop, right? And that's worldwide. Now, if you take a look at just the developed world, we'll call it the West. The West is like, what you hear 1.3 in Italy, 1.6 here. The only Western country that's above that's replacing itself is Israel. All the rest of them are below replacement. And and as the Europeans have found out the hard way, is not that you can bring in immigrants in order to bring in workers because you don't have young people to do the job, because the countries that don't have uh, that do have above replacement rate are all those countries that we just talked about, are cultures that don't assimilate. So you bring them in and they just destroy your civilization, right? So you bring in the Somalis, the Pakistanis, the Chinese, and pretty soon Nigerians, and it's over. So you got to figure out a way to do it, but you can't do it like that. Um,
But
so
but
that's
also
the interesting thing.
but think about all the advances that we've made in healthcare and technology, living conditions, water distribution. I mean, the safety in the workplace, all of these improvements that we've made in the last 100 years while the birth rate has gone down,
Mhm.
right? Life is easier. There's more resources. There's more available to you. There's more hope, really.
Mhm.
Yet people won't replace themselves. And I guess it's just because it's all mental. It's all, how do you feel? It's
Well,
not
yeah,
what's reality.
we've lost track of what's most important. I think we've started focusing on the most important thing is getting more stuff, you know, rather than getting more morality.
Yeah.
And if you look at the last 50 or 60 years, the whole push has been get a college degree so you can make more money. That what's the first question people ask people when they get out of high school? What are you going to do?
I
And the
do.
expected answer is go to college so I can make more money. Is
Mhm.
that the most important thing? Um, that will have
Well,
to be that will have to be an entire show sometime.
tune in next week.
Tune in next week. So, my friend, we have reached the top of the hour. So we probably should let these good folks go. Thank you all so much for joining us once again. Hope you had as much fun as we did. Do you have fun, Leslie?
I did. I always have fun with you, Don. Thank you.
Always have fun. It's great in sharing these things with you all. Let freedom ring. Keep doing our part, and we are winning. I like that. These are more
All right.
fun conversations than we were having 4 years ago. I can tell you that.
No.
All right. Take
All
care,
right.
everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Take care, Leslie.